Hey,
NC.
NC.
Close.
It's our very first podcast.
Yes, inaugural. Yes, inaugural or inaugural.
Whatever.
Okay. How you doing today?
Uh, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
all right. It's gloomy outside. We've had a hot spell. It's very humid.
I should mention our AC isn't working,
Our
right?
AC is not working, but at least it's not too hot today.
Yes. And we also have the cats. We have
Cats are outside.
cats are outside. There's a neighbor cat. There's a turf war going on.
There may be growling in the background. Don't worry, it's our cats.
And I'm annoyed because there's a hum somewhere in this thing. So my apologies for listeners if they hear that. I'm trying to fix it. So for our inaugural podcast, what are we gonna do?
So we're going to talk to John Howie Jr.
Right. It's always important. You gotta have the JHJ.
Jr.
Yeah, you can't do that though, right? JHJ would be the junior. Now, if he had named his kid, would that be JHJ Junior? Could you do that, JHJ?
It'd be a trip.
The third.
That's what they call them. Trip.
Oh, okay. So what are you thinking about the state of North Carolina right now?
State of North Carolina right now. Did you hear Congress passed recently about Thelonious Monk?
Oh, yes.
Did you hear about that? That was pretty cool. 100 celebrating his 100th birthday. That was pretty neat.
Yes. Seems like one of the few good things that they've been doing recently.
Yeah. Rhiannon Giddens she was formerly of the Carolina Chocolate Drop. She has received a MacArthur grant, Genius Grant. That's pretty cool. I guess I'm focusing on the positive right now.
Are you trying to stay positive? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our governor, his first official tweet was about Rhiannon Giddens, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Careful with the tweet.
I was talking with someone yesterday. I was having coffee with somebody, and they said, I've just gotten to the point now where I put my phone down. I don't look at my little notifications because it's all bad. So yeah, that's an important thing to remember, is that there's actually some good things going on in the world, despite what maybe the media relentless onslaught of information about. But what's happening on the federal level and the state level in North Carolina seems to just be a litany of depression. you know. So it's good to be able to focus on the positive. I was just going to say I'm still trying to figure out. I think today? I think in Greensboro, a federal judge is going to be looking at the new redistricting plan.
Oh yeah.
So I'll be interested to see what they say, if it's acceptable or not. And there have been some cases, and I think the Wisconsin redistricting is another one where they're talking about how it used to prove bias in a redistricting plan, it had to be done by like race or sex or something like that. But now there's this thought, this theory at least, that if you are districting by partisan, Republicans or Democrats, you're actually undermining democracy, which is a constitutional threat. So that you should be able to throw that out. So it'll be interesting. There's like this to North Carolina and Wisconsin, and I think another state that I cannot recall right now. So it'll be something to look out for.
It's important. People need to vote.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, how many people voted in the Raleigh municipal primary?
Well, also, if you think about it, like the people who are making these decisions on redistricting are the people that people put into office via voting.
Right.
So if you're not voting, this is what you get.
Right. Yeah. You don't really.
You think you don't have a voice? It all matters.
Right.
It all matters.
But, clearly it can't just be, I mean, I wonder what exactly is it that makes people not want to vote. I mean, some of it I'm sure is some shenanigans.
Getting jaded. Feeling like you're not, you're not making a difference. You're not being heard. Party. Well, it's tough. You're a small voice in a big world.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I was sort of brought up to that was a thing that was the thing. Voting was, you
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah.
You didn't, phone it in or whatever. That being said, I'm not sure. I mean, I share the sentiment sometimes of, you're voting, you're not voting to be excited. Sometimes you're voting because you feel like, well, it's the better of two evils. And then there has been this argument recently where it's like, and also the greater evil could be a whole lot greater than, what the lesser evil is. So we're going to have John come up and hopefully talk and play a little bit. And we will be right back. Thank you. And we are now joined by John Howie Jr.
Hello. Can you hear me there?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? All right. And Shannon's there.
Hi. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm multitasking.
Well, yeah. All right. Oh, I guess we'll just chat. I was going to say, by the way, I noticed, I don't know. The mind reminds you of things occasionally. 20 years since we've known each other.
Is that right? I guess it is.
Yeah.
Wow. When
you
On
at
Down the Track came out at the Borders.
Yeah, yes, the Borders. And who would have thought, honestly, that, we didn't really need to fear the large big box bookstores, but was like Amazon.
I know.
I feel almost nostalgic for Borders now.
And I remember feeling kind of like I was selling out to the man by being there. The record company was like, you got to go do this thing. You need to do it. And it was right after the day after Princess Diana died, I believe. I think she died the night before that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we got there and set up, and there were all these people reading their newspapers. And I closed my eyes, and I looked up after the first song, and they had all left.
Yeah, it was.
Except for like Phil.
Yeah.
Because we were so loud, and it was in it was in Cary.
No, you can swear.
It was in Cary. So, it was like, here we come on a Sunday morning.
Wait, so y'all met at a Borders
The $2 Pistols
in Cary?
Yes.
What were you doing in Cary, Phil?
Well, so...
What were you doing
So...
in Cary?
He's there to see his favorite band.
Right, exactly. Here's the thing is, and I have to tell this to Dave and Cody at some point, is... So when I moved, I think it was about the same down here from DC. It was about the same time, like, the alt country reached this sort of apogee,
Sure.
and it was like with the Whiskey Town record for Stranger's Almanac, and Dave did this preview piece, but he also mentioned Trailer Bride, Six String Drag, and $2 Pistols, which I liked all three of those better than Whiskey Town ultimately, and not to harsh on Caitlin or Skillet because I love them to death, but I never quite understood the fascination. It just didn't resonate with me in the same way that it did. So yeah, John had this sort of, I had been like a Hank Williams, Johnny Cash guy. I didn't know overly much about country. I like what I like, and so yeah. But it was like in the cafe. He was playing in the cafe with the tile on the floor, and it was just so bright and shiny, and he started. He did this deal where you do it on the stage where you kind of slide on your boot, I guess a little, but on the tile, he was like, shoop! He just sort of went from one side of the cafe
on ice.
It was impressive. Yeah. I was like, wow, does he do this all the time?
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Proven. What else
So what was your come on to him after the show?
I just went up.
Hi, my name is Phil.
I just went up and said,
I love you.
No, it was funny.
He brought up Richard Thompson. I remember.
That's right. Because Scott Miller of was he playing Sticks?
It was Mike Krause on guitar.
Mike Krause, that's right.
At that point.
That's right.
He's not on that record, but
yeah, because
$2 Pistols history is so strange. That record came out, and then we toured behind it with me and maybe two people who were actually on the record, because the drummer was Chris Phillips,
right,
from the Squirrel Nut Zippers, and they started really taking off around that time, so he had to go do that. The bass player was my boss at Poindexter, a guy named Jack Campbell, and there was no way that he was going to do that kind of touring. So I got Jeff Hard on bass. I got Mike Krause on electric guitar, because the guitar player had been John Price from June. That band just it started on a fluid note in terms of personnel, and kind of stayed that way for a long time. But that was fun. Yeah, that was weird.
that gig was interesting.
It was interesting.
But I just remember also that there was the Gypsy Shiny Diner next door, that there had been this big war because of the shininess of it, and they made them grow bushes or something to reduce.
That's right.
To reduce the shininess of the
Yeah.
Gypsy Shiny Diner.
Oh,
It was
Carrie.
Carrie.
Oh, Carrie.
Is that the Monkey Joe's now? Was that?
Yeah, I believe
yeah,
so.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
you had
Oh,
to do those
wow.
things. Back then, you had to do those things at those stores. The Pistols. I mean, years later, 2002, when You Ruined Everything came out, we were in Boston. We were touring, and we played Boston. And I remember we did a Borders in-store in Boston. You know, what's that? 5 years later, we were still doing them. We were still doing Borders coast to coast.
all the borders. Well, I remember working when I worked for Yep Right for all of a month or something. That was one of their big customers.
accounts,
Yeah, right.
sure,
One of the big
sure.
account, Best Buy, Borders, those kind of. Where are they now?
That's so strange. I actually liked Borders a lot. I used to shop at the one over here.
For some reason, yeah, I liked it
You
better
and I used
than
to go there.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you lived on Legion Road. Yeah, we used to
Barnes
meet
and
up over
Noble
there.
was not the cool place.
No,
yeah.
Borders had all the monster magazines
Yep.
and all that nerdy stuff.
better music selection.
Absolutely, yeah.
So question, this is the thing. Of course, I moved down here as you were sort of, I don't know what the kids call it, branding yourself as, front man, country guy.
Right.
What I know, especially when I would first meet people around here, they'd be like, "Yeah, John Howie does the $2 pistols, but let me tell you about his drumming." And I wondered when you, I guess what the last band you played drums with was Finger, right? Was it Finger?
No, it was June.
June? Was
the
it June?
last
Okay.
kind of real one. I mean, until the Disarmers. Now that was the. I mean, I would moonlight with my friends like Greg Hawkes.
Yeah.
Whenever he would ask me to, because we were close. But June was the last real one. June was signed to Beggar's Banquet, and they were already popular. I had never seen them, but they were popular. They were, selling out clubs locally, and they had some singles out. And then this bidding war started for them between like Geffen and Sony and Arista Records and all this stuff. Because the Breeders got big, right? That thing like surprised everyone and sold it. I mean, we were all there. It sold a zillion copies, and so all of a sudden, in typical major label fashion,
Everybody had
something
their
does
Breeders.
well, they want a million of them, So they came after June, I think, sort of thinking that we would be part of that, and alternative music was having this, big breakthrough. And so June called me, and they said, things are getting really serious, and so our drummer kind of wanted to do other things, so he left. And we've heard you're a really great drummer. We were just running in different scenes for whatever reason. I think I was a little bit older than them. And would you like to come try out? And I did, and joined, and they, started paying me well, and they took a record. Sony offered us like $1 million record deal, and they balked at it because they didn't want to be beholden to a major label for 7 albums, which ultimately turned out to be a pretty smart move. And so they signed with Beggar's Banquet. We went to Nashville and made a record with Jim Rondinelli, who's produced. He was part of Zoo Records, which did Matthew Sweet's Girlfriend. And he produced that Big Star Columbia live album, that reunion one that they did in the 90s with the cats from the Posies. He produced it. It came out in 96. We probably toured for a total of 6 months, and then the band broke up.
Oh.
And by that point, I was already doing the $2 Pistols. And I just figured, screw it. What have I got to lose?
Right.
I might as well be doing something. I might as well be doing something that I really want to do and not making any money.
All right. So was that the impetus? Was you decided you wanted to play country music and be in the front?
At some point in the early 90s, that seed was planted. I remember going to see the Backsliders in like one of their earliest shows. Must have been one of their first 4 or 5 shows. It was probably 91 or 92, and thinking that it just never occurred to me that people in my world who were even close to my age would play that kind of music. I thought this was something done by like Martians or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And when I saw them doing it, it sort of gave me this encouragement, and I was there was a lot going on at that time. You know, there was I had gotten really into the country thing. I was in my early 20s. I had access to a good country library through my father. And there was a guy, I worked at Poindexter Records in Durham, and there was a wonderful man who just died named John Miller, Dr. Miller. He was one of the guys who founded the School of Science and Math, I believe. But he came in the record store all the time. We were very close, and he made me mixtapes constantly of kind of deeper country people like Charlie Walker and Gene Shepard and people like that. And it sort of fed this love for this music that I already had. And so through kind of a combination of all those things, I was already singing. I started learning how to play acoustic in my early 20s and just sort of sat down at some point. I'd been writing songs for, Finger and other bands I was in kind of around that time. I was always in bands, I was a drummer in Chapel Hill. There was always work,
you're popular.
Totally,
You're popular
yeah,
being
yeah.
the drummer.
Yeah. And I was in my 20s. I had no responsibilities, so why not? But so around that time, I sat down, one day with the acoustic and just thought, I'll just write. Let me just write a song, not worry about like what kind of, not say, okay, I'm writing it for this power pop band I'm playing with. I was playing with Stamey around that time too.
Okay.
Playing drums for him. And I just kind of sat down and, excuse me, and wrote a song, and it came out, very country. And I thought, well, if that's what naturally is supposed to happen, then I'll just roll with it. And
It's been
I've
rolling
been
with
it ever
since.
since.
Okay.
Yeah, however many years later, 24 years, 23 years later.
Yeah. Do you want to play a song now, or? Oh, okay.
I can do that. Let's see here.
You want to set it up or anything?
Yeah. Been going through some kind of stressful times, as we all do, and I was talking to a friend of mine just about all the stress that it seems like a lot of people are kind of going through stress. You know what I mean? Maybe it's sort of the birds of a feather thing. I don't know, but I was talking to a friend of mine, and I just had this great moment where I was sitting in my house, and I just thought, I'm just not going to worry about any of this bullshit anymore. And so for like this very brief period, I stopped worrying about it, and it was great. You know what I mean? It was really magnificent.
It was so great and so
wonderful.
brief.
Yeah, and so I caught that moment. I was in that frame of mind long enough to actually write a song about it, and then went back to just being, anxiety ridden shortly after that. But so now I have this song to remind me,
Right.
You know what I mean? That there was this moment where I was carefree.
What's it called?
It was like John Malkovich in Being John Malkovich when they all leave him. He's got that moment where he's like, I'm free, and then they all come back. So it's called Easy on Me. Let's see if I can get it going here. We've played it live. The Rosewood Bluff has played it live a couple times.
Oh, cool.
I used to beg, used to plead, used to fall down on my knees. Did my best to try to be the kind of fool you never leave the chances slim, the candles dim. But now the light I can see, it ain't hard to take it anymore. It's all easy on me. I'd seen you out in them dark times, and it made me want to die. Pour the poison and I'd cry myself to sleep another night. it ain't hard to take it anymore. It's all easy on me. No, it ain't hard to take it anymore. It's all easy on me. Yeah.
Very nice.
That
Very
was
nice.
beautiful.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Now that's going to be on a Rosewood Bluff record.
Yeah. One of these good old
One of these
days.
days. So yeah, now this kind of leads me to a point. What led sort of to, I guess, the dissolution of the $2 Pistols and the formation of the Rosewood Bluff? Where were you at? You know,
I think so the $2 Pistols started in probably 95, and we put out our first record in 97, which is a studio album. And we had lineup changes. So the second record was a live album that ended up doing really well for us. It was supposed to be kind of this stopgap, excuse me, between records, but it ended up kind of taking on a life of its own. And then our third, that band had a very strange history in terms of recorded output. The second record's live, and the third record was eight songs, I believe.
yeah, the EP.
EP of duets with Tiff Merritt, most of which were covers except 2 songs that she and I wrote together. And so that was 97 first album, 98 live album, 99 $2 Tiff Merritt record, and then nothing for 3 years.
I remember that.
Remember that? So,
I should mention I actually managed these guys.
and so Phil was working with us at that time and kind of being a cheerleader, because it was just things were crazy. Our bass player got cancer and died. I got divorced in there, like just all kinds of, there's the kind of mayhem of going from your 20s to your 30s, and these outside things were happening, and a lot of them very tragic. And it was right in there that I met Scott McCall. And so he and I kind of formed this partnership. We sort of understood each other. I mean, kind of understood each other on one level very, very well, and put together this band, a rhythm section that he brought in of Neil Spaulding, who we all know and love, and Mark Weaver on drums, who's a great guy. And we just kind of plugged away for a while, tried to figure out what we were going to do, got new songs ready, and then 2002 put out You Ruined Everything, which did well for us. Spent a year touring behind that.
Yeah.
About 6 months into that, and my father died right before that record came out. So
I remember getting the phone call.
a lot of mayhem there. About 6 months into touring behind that record, our drummer quit, which is when Phil introduced me to Matt Brown.
Yep.
And so then, as we all know, Matt's musicianship kind of, spiked things.
Yeah.
He was a gifted musician, obviously, and he was very encouraging and enthusiastic, and all of those things that you want, someone to be who's in your band. So we ended that year playing at Opryland, which was like this dream come true for me. And then we put out another record called Hands Up. We got Mark O'Brien on bass, and we put out another record for Yep Rock called Hands Up. And, I thought that was a great record. We got Brian Paulson to produce it. Some good things happened, but, I mean, it just seemed like the way we were doing it, we'd kind of hit a ceiling. And it wasn't a bad ceiling. We could pull 100, 150 people in New York City or Boston or someplace like that. But it was a ceiling nonetheless. Like I think we all sort of understood, like, it's just not gonna, it's not gonna.
Yeah,
grow.
this is it.
Right. This is as good as it's gonna get. And it was good, but it wasn't going to get, like, we'd kind of missed a few opportunities to kind of to take it to the next level. Some of them through our own fault, some of them not through ours. I mean,
What were those opportunities?
There was a moment when a booking agency that's very successful called the Creative Artists Agency, CAA. I mean, I think they book like Black Sabbath and shit like that. They have offices in different places. They were interested in us, and some things kind of beyond our control happened that I would prefer just not to go into.
Okay.
That kept us from getting the deal we we thought we were going to get with them. Had we gotten that deal, we would have been on the road all the time. We would have done it for a living, and we were all committed in that moment to doing it. When that fell through, I think it certainly for Scott and Mark, and understandably, because that seemed like our shot. This company that books, whoever, Alan Jackson and Shania Twain and people like that, they were taking on smaller acts. They had taken on BR549, and they got us a show with them in Kentucky, and they got us a few really great shows. But there was this sort of incident that occurred that had nothing to do with the band itself, that caused them to kind of lose faith in us. And, it was hard being in that band. I mean, Dolph Ramser, the manager of the Avett Brothers, and David Childers got a booking agent to come see us when we were in Nashville. The CAA got us a gig there at the Exit Inn, I believe. And, this guy, the manager of the Avett Brothers certainly had pull. He was a nice guy, big $2 Pistols fan, got an agent to come see us. And the agent, by all accounts, called him and said, "Why did you waste my time with this? There are a million bands like this in Nashville," which to me is obviously bullshit. I don't think anyone sounded like the $2 Pistols, but he was kind of making this out to be like though I liked them, like a band like the Derailers or something, who were just like this kind of like, yet another country band with Telecasters. And I always thought we had these other elements, and some people saw that, people like Phil were there to be able to comprehend that. And other people just saw the hat and the Telecaster and were like, what, there's nothing here. It's just another one of these bands. So we made one last record, Here Tomorrow, Gone Today. We decided to leave Yep Rock, and we made this one last record that I paid for. And it was difficult. At that point, I think we were all kind of burnt out. We wanted to do different things. There were arguments over, direction. I mean, and not just in general, from song to song.
Oh, okay.
It was not a particularly pleasant experience, as those things go, and it caused a lot of confusion. We fired Matt during those sessions, and a week later I called him and begged his forgiveness and begged him to come back. And thankfully, he was the kind of guy who never held that over my head. Said, "Yep, I think we both needed to kind of change some things. Let's change them and move forward." And but it was just a very confusing, weird thing. And then the record came out, and I hired a publicist and did all these things that you're supposed to do. And it, it did okay, but it didn't.
Same kind of result, basically.
Same kind of result, And so at that point, I think people were kind of at the end of their rope. And Scott and Mark had become the president of his web design company. He had purchased it, and Scott got an offer to go tour with Tiff Merritt, so he took it. And when he took that gig, I broke up the band, which is when Matt and I called Nathan Golub and said, I'm going to start this new group. I mean, that was another thing. Like, I'd always wanted pedal steel.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted that, and Scott didn't want it. We both had our reasons. That I'm not saying that makes him a bad
right. Just the classic artistic difference kind of thing.
Yeah, and I wanted, frankly, probably more control. And I got it.
Well, it did go from $2 Pistols to John Howie and the Rosewood Bluff.
I mean, that's why I put John Howie Jr. at the front of it, because I was well aware at that point that lineups would change. I mean, there are people that can get away with that. We were talking about like the Fall earlier, like Mark E. Smith, right, can sort of get away with that, But I don't want to get away with that. I want it to be like, well, like Merle Haggard and the Strangers.
Right.
I can guarantee you it'll be a good band, but I'm not going to promise you who's going to be in that band.
Right.
I've been pretty lucky, in the last several years. I got Tim Shearer on guitar, and Nathan's been with, stuck by me. I mean, and who knows, those guys could get bored or want to go do something else, and I wouldn't blame them. But they've stuck by me for a while, and so there you are.
Yeah,
it brings us to where we are now.
Well, you're also prepping a solo record, right?
I'm trying to finish that. I mean, one of the problems with playing drums in a touring successful band is that it doesn't, as you get older, like you guys know how it is. You have like this pie, and 95% of that pie is your child, or in your case, your children.
Yeah.
And you got to squeeze everything else into that other 5%. You know what I mean? And you just got to shove it in there somehow. So, you know, I have a benefactor for the solo record. Someone paying for it, which is great. I make my records with Rick Miller from Southern Culture on the Skids, and he's very busy too. So that's another problem, is doing the scheduling. But right now I've got acoustic guitar, vocals, and drums for probably 10 songs. Got electric guitar on 2 or 3 of those. So at this point it's more just like put the bass, put the pedal steel, see if I want to add anything else. I mean, I think if I had a solid week, I could finish it. It's just a matter of, you know, I think Roger Miller once said 90% of it is 90% done. And that's where I'm at.
So all you need is a solid week with
Exactly.
no interruptions.
Exactly.
That's totally going to happen any
You know,
minute now.
yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure, please.
Like I remember like you telling stories of like $2 pistols. I don't even know if this is pre-finger or not.
Okay.
But like when you went to London and all that, and you were super young, like how old were you, and how the hell did your parents like let you go?
They kind of insisted. It wasn't a matter of letting.
You need
It
to
was
go.
like-
I mean, because you've been playing music since you were
17,
seven.
first time
Yeah, that's a long time.
in the clubs.
Yeah.
Actually, I was 16. It's February of '86. My birthday is March 3rd, 1969. So I was 16 the first time I played drums in a club. I was scared shitless. I went to England when I was a teenager. I was in a band called Light in August. It was sort of like a kind of Echo and the Bunnymen type band, maybe. Thank you so much. And
You were just a
Phil's
young
bringing
punk
me
back
coffee.
then.
Yeah. And I wasn't into that. You know, when they approached me about playing drums, I mean, the closest I was into something like that would have been like Susie and the Banshees or Public Image Limited. You know, I mean, I was still listening to, you know, the Bad Brains and Generation X and stuff like that. You know, I had not given up that dream. But when I met those guys, I got into things like Echo and the Bunnymen. A band called the Chameleons. They were really into that band, a British band. Killing Joke through them. I hadn't listened to them yet at that point. And so, you know, I was kind of further exposure to the Sisters of Mercy, which I don't really care about that much now, but bands like that. And, you know, that band was doing pretty well locally. There was a cassette called the Cradle Tapes, a bunch of Live at the Cat's Cradle bands. Anyway, I was in high school. I went to college. And, you know, I was doing okay, but every time I'd get a call about, you know, playing drums, it was like, yeah, I mean, I'm 18 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I can get up at 7 o'clock and get laughed at walking across college, you know, for having long hair and earrings and eyeliner and being into the New York Dolls, or I can go be at a club in Chapel Hill, like playing drums where people love me. Like, you know, what would you do? You know what I mean? Like,
So it's kind of a no-brainer.
right. So after a year of college, I dropped out and I took a job. Light in August kind of started floundering. I wasn't playing drums for anyone. I think the band broke up. And my parents said, you know, you can't just sort of live here and loaf around. You know, you've got to do something. If you want to go to school, we'll pay for it, which was, you know, I didn't realize at the time what a gift that was.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, of course you will. You're my parents. You know? That's not what parents do. Or you got to get a job. You've got to go to work, you know. And so I took a job at the tax department that paid very, very well. It was physical labor. Like you literally put you got the tax forms, you put the labels on them, you bound them together, you put them in bags, and then you lifted these 75-pound bags, you know, over your head. You spent a day doing that. It was hard work, man. Even at 18 or 19, whatever. I guess I was 19 by that point. I was doing that. I was in a relationship that was not particularly working. It was not very healthy. But I was living I was kind of in two relationships, but there was one I was in that was more sort of prominent, and that one I was living with this woman downtown, and it was a very confusing time. It was a very, very difficult time. I'm going to do this here. I mean, Phil knows about this. You may not know about this. I don't know. I was also in a relationship at that time with a man.
Mm-hmm.
And in Wake County, the 1980s, we weren't even comfortable being open about that in the punk rock scene.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was terrified.
Right.
And I didn't know what bisexuality was. I didn't know that was a thing. There was no internet. So I ended that relationship, and it was devastating. And I was like, I thought that I was crying and sad all the time because this person had been my best friend. And it was just a very, and I think why I was genuinely sad is because it didn't really need to end, and I was ending it for the wrong reasons. But I didn't tell my parents, or tell my sister. I didn't feel comfortable telling anyone about that, you know, even though I'm sure they would have been fine with it. So I was very sad. And then I was still in this relationship with this woman that was, you know, if you're seeing someone else on the sly, it's not a healthy relationship. So it's not healthy. My father knew it was not healthy. Then I was driving my sister's Carmen Ghia, and I wrecked the car. Totaled the fucking car.
Not the Carmen Ghia. What color was it?
Yellow.
Oh.
Canary yellow.
Yes,
Oh,
it's beautiful.
yeah.
The gas tank in those is in the front.
Oh.
And I rammed somebody.
Oh.
And my dad knew the gas tank was in the front. So he came to see me that night. He came down downtown Raleigh, and he said, here's what's happening. You're fucking floundering. You're 19 years old, and you're only going to be 19 once, and you're not doing shit, man. You are fucking up. Okay? You're unhappy. You're a great musician. You're not even really playing in a band. You're working this dead-end job at the tax department. You know what happens if you want to? There's nothing wrong with working at the tax department. Guys like you get offered lifetime gigs there. Those 60-year-old dudes who work there that you told me about, they started where you're starting. Mm-hmm. So if you want that gig, it's totally respectable. It's hard work. But I don't think you want that gig. You know?
I love your dad.
He was a good guy.
He was a
That's
great
some
guy.
good, solid advice that you
It was
need
very
at
solid
19.
advice. So he had this stack of papers with him. And he said, I have done the research. And because you were in college, you know, within the last, whatever it was, 6 or 7 months, you're eligible for this work exchange program. And I'm advising you to get the fuck out of Dodge for a while. See the world. Okay? Go.
Go fly, my
Right.
son.
Yeah.
And I had plenty of money because I had no bills. And that the thing about that tax department job is, man, for 1988, I think I was getting like $8 an hour.
Wow.
Like, it was
Nice.
absurd. I mean, zero benefits
Yeah.
or anything, but the money was great. So I had all this money. I didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I was spending, you know, if I spent money, it was on hot dogs or like, you know, used Alice Cooper, you know, records at Reader's Corner or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
I had tons of money lying around. So he said, you know, how much money do you have? We figured it out. He goes, you got enough for the ticket. Okay. Just go. Just fucking,
Wow.
these people will set you up with housing. They'll set you up with a job. Like they hold your hand through this process. They want it to go well.
So it's like is that like a international version of like AmeriCorps or something?
Yeah, pretty much. It was called BUNAC, which stood for British Universities North American Club.
Oh.
It's kind of an
That's a really stilted kind of name.
They move the words around so when you take the first letter from each one, it spells something that you can pronounce.
right.
Instead of like British American switcheroony or whatever.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I went over there. My sister had already done it. And that was the other thing. She had been over there and she was about to leave.
So it was a Howie exchange.
So yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's how my father knew about it in the first place. So I went over there and had the time of my fucking life. My sister said, you can live with me. You know, I'm going to be here for a month. You got to pay rent, but you can live in my flat. There are flats in Ladbroke Grove, which is like where the Clash are from, right near Notting Hill Gate.
Right.
The cover of Black Market Clash.
Yeah.
Don
Yeah.
Letts, that was like right down the street.
Before it got
Sure.
gentrified.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's totally different now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was very much, you know, it was very England, you know.
Wow.
So I got there, and I crash to get over the jet lag, and we got up my sister got me up the next day, and she goes, all right, we're going to do something fun. Didn't you have a record by this band, The Vibrators? And I said, yeah, man, Pure Mania. I love that album. And she goes, well, they're playing at this pub.
Holy shit.
Out on the outskirts of London. Let's go. So we went there. I just went on and on. It was great. And I used to see members of the Damned on the subway all the time. Paul Simonon lived near me at that point, so I'd see him walking around in his cable sweaters and all that.
So how long were you there?
It was just unbelievable. So what happened was, when I got there, I had a friend at the time named Ricky Hicks, who was in Finger. He was in one of the first hardcore bands in North Carolina called No Labels.
Yeah.
With some other people. And so at any rate, he said, well, I've got a friend over there who was in a British punk rock band called the Stupids, but he left that band. He formed his own band, and they're about to tour Europe, and they need a drummer, so hook up. So I called this guy and named Ed. He was going by Ed Shred at the time. His real name's Ed Wynn. And I said, I'm here, man. And he was like, right, well, let's get together and, see how your drumming is, whatever. And so I went and he fucking loved it. So he said, basically, I got there in November, and he said, we're leaving in, mid-January for this 2.5-month tour of Europe. So
Timing is everything, man.
Yeah. So I went down to the Bunac office. And so that was the other thing. All of a sudden, I had all these new friends. Mm-hmm. These kind of punk rock people.
Yeah.
They weren't exploited. I mean, they had been that. They were a few years older than me, but now they were into Rites of Spring and all that kind of stuff. The kind of DC stuff.
Oh yeah.
They were all about that world, right? So now I had this whole new group of friends. It was magnificent, and I got a job for a few months so I could have money until we left. And my job was, my title, I was working at a stockbroking firm called Shearson Lehman Hutton, and my title was Assistant Package Monitor.
Sounds very official.
It was very official. So what I did was I sat in a fucking the bottom of a parking deck, the basement, with these security guards. And my job was to, when a package was dropped at this dock, to sign for it. That was it. I didn't have to move it within the company. That was someone else's gig.
Those were the days, huh?
I would spend entire days reading the newspaper. I was hours sleeping. And I got paid something ridiculous, like £10 or something an hour for it. It was absurd. But I had to wear a suit, which sucked. But it was kind of near the tree where Mark Bolan died, so I used to love that. I mean, I obviously didn't love it, but it was cool to go by there and see, because there were always flowers and pictures and all that stuff. So I went there a few times.
When did he die? That was right around
1977. Yeah. So he'd been dead a while, but they still loved him. I mean, his legend was very much alive, and I was a big fan. So, so it was magnificent, man. And I never wanted to come back. And I came back to fucking Raleigh in 1989, and I was depressed and miserable and hated it. And I was 20 years old, and I was like, what am I doing in the land of Jesse Helms again?
Oh, yeah.
It just sucks here. And especially after, literally bumping into Dave Vaney in the grocery store.
Not to mention almost getting beaten up at a National Front bar.
Yeah.
John walked into what did you say? You walked into the wrong,
it was
wrong bar.
There were things like that would happen. So Screwdriver at that point, they weren't allowed to have shows in the city limits, right? They still existed. It was before Ian Stewart. It was before somebody ran over that fucker with a car. Somebody finally just had it. No. You white supremacist shitbag, I'm running you over. So anyway, the Screwdriver were not allowed to have shows within city limits. They were allowed to have them at night. Well, the tube stops running at a certain time. Uh-huh. So if you missed the last tube, you'd have to take these double-decker buses. And the fear was always that you'd get stuck on one of those with a bunch of skinheads coming back from one of those gigs. Yikes. Now, that never happened to me, but it did happen to friends of mine. Oh. But, for the most part, I felt safe there. The only time I felt... And this is having seen, I went to see Sham 69 when I was there. I went to see Iggy. the only time I really felt unsafe, honestly, I went to Brixton to see Killing Joke, and that was a lot of testosterone. That was a lot of like, you know,
Aggro.
a lot of aggro, like not from them, but you know, just that music is so yes, and they all had their faces painted like Jazz Coleman used to paint his face. But other than that, man,
they were excited.
Yeah, it was fun. I had a wonderful time. I did not want to come back, and I came back. Punk rock at that point was kind of dead there. It was before the whole Collector thing and whatever the big Rebellion festival they have.
Yeah.
I came back from there. I took my snare drum, and it was like a deep snare drum. And right before I left to go to the airport, I took the top head off and literally filled that fucker with 7-inch singles that I had bought while I was over there.
Yeah, the duty-free import technique, huh?
So many records I never thought I'd even see.
Right, you're going to like the cultural hinterlands after this. You gotta be prepared.
Well, one of my favorite bands was Chelsea. I loved all that 70s British punk rock, and one of my favorite bands was Chelsea. Well, I get there, Gene October, their singer, works. Their IRS Records had a store there at that time that sold like REM stuff like that. And so me and a friend of mine went in there. And you know, I mean, this is Gene October, like he's like one of my heroes, and you know, there's some REM stuff there, and this friend of mine's looking through like the REM stuff, and Gene October goes, "So you like REM, eh?" And he goes, yeah, and he goes, "Oh, I've got, you know, loads of videos upstairs." So he lived in an apartment above the IRS store. He's got loads of videos and stuff right upstairs. I'm like, "Oh, really? Awesome." He goes, "Yeah. Come upstairs and jerk me off and I'll show them to you."
Oh, man.
For videos? Oh, my God.
It seems like Gene was having
Doesn't
a bad
seem
stretch.
like a fair trade.
Well, and to be perfectly honest with you, like, not to be crude or anything, but at that point, man, had he been a little cooler about it, I probably would have done.
And
you know what I mean?
If you
like,
you know, how much did you like REM, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah, I didn't give a shit about REM.
Yeah.
But had he vaguely, you know, wined and dined or
Right.
been friendly, I probably would have
Yeah.
been like, "Gene October, sure, I'll fuck you." You know?
Yeah. He didn't really. You know, you want to like feel like, hey, I'm worth the time and effort.
Totally,
you know.
Totally. Anyway, so there were things like that, but I came back from there with a bunch of records. I saw, so many cool things happen. Anyway, there was an National Front march right around that time, and right down in the fucking front of that thing, I saw it happening, and then I was at a friend of mine's house later, and it was on the news, and it showed this older guy, like, you know, I was 19 or 20 at this point.
Everybody was older. Yeah.
He was probably 30, but he might as well have been fucking 50. This big guy with like kind of a shaved head down in the front of the march, just going, "Yeah, fuck the National Front." Yeah. He was just so angry, and it was great. And it was Menzie from the Angelic Upstarts. Still out there, man.
Right.
You know, and those guys were around. I used to see Roman Yug, whoever you say his name, Roman Yug from The Damned on the train all the time. And yeah, it was just amazing. It was like going to Neverland, you know what I mean? It was like, so anyway, I did not want to come back, but I did. I had to, and I came back, and that's when we formed Finger.
Right, and I remember, I think before I even knew you, I remember, what was the Freedom of Choice record that had like Superchunk and Erectus Monotone, and had the. In fact, that was one of the points of our conversation when we first were. I think you were playing at the 506, and you had just finished sound check, and I made some joke about playing Tainted Love, and you told me, what was it you wanted that you guys wanted to do? The Knacks, Good Girls Don't.
We did do it, so we didn't know that it was a benefit for Planned Parenthood. They just said you're supposed to cover like.
I actually have that CD.
New waves, yeah. They're
got it
like,
a long time ago.
You're supposed to do new wave covers, and so people are like covering the undertones and stuff, and we're like, "That's not new wave." Like
yeah, it's a little too cool.
Which one did Sonic Youth do? I remember Sonic Youth too.
Oh, Ça Plan Pour Moi.
By Plastic
Merchant.
That's new wave. Sure,
yes.
Sure. But so we were like, well, you know what? Like new wave to me always had these pretty negative connotations,
Right.
certainly in terms of seriousness. I guess you might be able to fit some Devo in there.
Yeah.
But so we decided to do Good Girls Don't by the Knack, and we recorded it. And then Bill and Barbara were like, yeah, this is a benefit for Planned Parenthood. And we were like,
Oh.
Why not that?
so we did Tainted Love instead, which I thought was, I mean, it's an okay version, but that's not legitimately, like, that's an old soul song. Speaking of Mark Bolan, Gloria, the woman he was married to when he died, that was her hit.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
So now here's the question, I guess. What changed your relationship with country music? I mean, were you like, I guess Shannon and myself, were, you were exposed to it, and it sort of had this retrograde kind
Totally.
you just you're like, this
I heard
isn't
it all
me,
the time. Sure, I heard it all the time when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Like I remember my dad playing. He had that album "I Am What I Am" by George Jones that had "He Stopped Loving Her Today."
Yeah.
And there's that line. When you're a kid, you mishear lyrics. There's that line where he goes, "They placed a wreath upon his door." I thought he was saying they placed a ring upon his dog. I never understand why they.
That's what turned you off of country music for so long. Yeah.
Those are the worst lyrics in the world.
Weird dog wearing ring people.
But I mean, I liked it when I was little because my dad liked it and we were close and he'd sing along with her or whatever. But I just kind of went through that thing everybody goes through as a teenager, which was like the last fucking thing I want is to be associated with my parents' tastes.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was high school.
Right.
I grew up in the country. All the people who hated me because I was different listened to the popular country at the time. So it was like, fuck country music.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have that. That's not the experience that I had with it. That is what led me away from bands like Leonard Skinner.
Yeah.
Because
all
those
well, this
people
was
listen to
like,
shit
well, for
that,
me, it was like Garth Brooks, all that. And,
Sure.
and it wasn't old school country. Like my parents
Sure.
weren't really into old school country until, I guess I got older. And honestly, I didn't start listening to country until I heard like $2 Pistols.
Okay.
Till I moved here and started listening. I was like, hey, his voice sounds really,
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's great.
I mean, because you do. Your
Flattering.
voice has such like an old school country authentic sound. It's not put on like,
Right.
the newer country back when I was coming up. It was just like, it wasn't Hank Williams. It was not George. It was not Johnny. It wasn't any of that.
Yeah.
And then I started appreciating all the old school country, and it was like, oh, I do like country music.
Well, that's the thing.
I
yeah.
always loved bluegrass. Like my
Sure.
grandparents played bluegrass.
Oh, okay, cool. Wow. That's great. Yeah.
And I always consider like bluegrass like the punk rock version of like the countryside because it was
The underground part.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Totally.
But-
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I didn't have.
What is that?
I don't know, but it sounds like hip hop.
That's my newest release. Do you like my direction?
It's Alexa.
Alexa has had enough of hip hop, had enough of country apparently. All right.
Weird.
That is strange. Okay, it's a genuine podcast
That's
moment,
great.
people.
I love it. Nice to hear some
Tell
tunes.
Alexa
Alexa,
to
stop.
shush.
Now the question is, what did we say
We
that
didn't
caused
even call,
Alexa?
I don't know.
There was some word that was used, yeah.
It's like,
I don't know. It was like Hispanic hip hop.
oh,
That was
see,
playing.
it was like the cultural counterbalance.
Maybe.
But that does actually make me.
Maybe it was when I was like, fuck country.
The
music.
thing for me, like, there was the hokiness of especially 75 onward of, hee haw and the terrible clothing. Like, and I lived in Roanoke, you had Lakeside Amusement Park,
Right.
and they would have it seemed like Conway Twitty
Sure.
and
Oh,
the Statler
yeah.
brothers like every other week.
Right.
And,
Like state
you just
fairs.
like wanted to get as far away from
Yeah.
that as possible. But the other thing was sort of the cultural baggage that it had gotten.
Yeah.
It was saddled with, especially after the 60s of like, a bunch of racists and, they're, they don't represent what the South should be,
Well,
et cetera,
sure. And at some point, you have to talk about redefining. Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
I've just admitted on this podcast that I've had a same-sex relationship, and don't tell me that I'm the first dude who sings country music who's had that. I
Yeah.
might
Right,
be one of the
right.
first to fucking admit
Yeah.
it.
Right, exactly,
But
yeah.
but I mean, we're in the 21st century, and at this point, like, you know, I just don't see the need to kind of, you know, continue to cling to that sort of thing. Now, no, but see, I had it a little bit easier because the guy that I knew
Right.
who listened to Merle Haggard,
Right.
George Jones, Hank Williams, you know, I didn't associate that music with being politically right wing because the guy I knew that listened to it wasn't a bigot.
Right. Right.
He was very Southern.
Right.
You know, he was from Tupelo, Mississippi, but my dad was not a bigot. He was not racist.
Right.
He gave money to the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Right.
He was very much against all that. You know, very Southern guy. So for me, like, the rednecks that I knew listened to shit like Skinner or even like Judas Priest and stuff.
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like,
Oak Ridge Boys.
yeah, you know, I mean, they certainly weren't listening to Buck Owens, you know, maybe
Yeah.
Bob Seger or stuff like that. So for me, it was the same thing. My mother was a jazz piano player. She played jazz incessantly. I felt about country the exact same way I felt about, you know, Bill Evans and Sarah Vaughan, which was like, that's what my parents listened to. So it's the last thing I want to hear, you know. There was no danger of, you know, I mean, and it was hard for me because, you know, I mean, you know, my mom and dad went to see the Dead Kennedys. Like, I mean, it was hard to rebel. You know what I mean? It's tough to rebel against people who are buying you tickets for the Dead Boys reunion show. You know?
Yeah, I didn't have that problem. My father was an accountant, and my mom was a nurse, so it was easy.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really good way to define myself. I'm not an accountant, by God. You know,
Totally.
as opposed to if my father had bought me tickets to, you know, see The Damned or something, that would have created a conundrum.
It was quite the conundrum. But so.
What did you do to rebel? Since they were hard to
I ran
rebel
away
against.
to California when I was 16. That worked.
And they didn't know you were gone. You just like,
That worked.
oh.
The Meat Puppets.
How the hell
played-
did you get to California?
Here's what happened. When I started working when I was 16, and I'd started accumulating punk rock records by that point. You know, my dad was a substance abuse guy. He ran the Alcoholism Treatment Center in Wake County Alcoholism Treatment Center. They named one of the buildings after him when he died. There's a plaque there, right? He was kind of a big deal there. That was his life. I mean, he should have been a fucking big deal there. Like, he took me there on Christmas a couple times. You know, he was obsessed with it, and that was his
That's
deal.
amazing.
So he would get, once substance abuse started becoming a thing, which is in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And he started making more money. He was also getting flown around to speak at these conferences. And he would get flown to New York City, you know, and he would say, I'm going to go buy some jazz records for your mother. What are you looking for? Now, New York City, you know, Bleecker Bob's, places like that actually had punk rock records. So by the time I was 16, between his help and me, when I was 16, I'd worked at a Hardee's and a Shoney's.
Shiny.
Yeah, that'll set you up for rebellion right there.
It was terrible, but you know, all I wanted was money to buy records with, and so it breaks my heart to even think about this. But Dennis, who owned the Skylight Exchange, owned a place where I don't even know what it is now. It was Bandito's over there by the Cat's Cradle, that little building. Anyway, before it was Skylight, that's where he had his shop, and they didn't have sandwiches. It was just used books and records. And I love Dennis, but think about this. In 1985, I took that dude enough stuff for him to give me $150 cash. I gave him everything. I got rid of
man.
all of it. I had the original 3 Hits from Hell Misfits single. I mean, just
Why?
so I could go to California.
Oh, okay.
What had your mind set on California?
Yeah.
You're just like, I need to get out
When
of
I was
here.
15 years old in December 1984, my dad got flown to New York City for one of these conferences. He took me with him. Let's go have a great time. You know, there'll be like, you know, a couple days when you're kind of on your own, but you know, my dad's very free spirit. Just go wander around, you know, Greenwich Village. You'll be fine. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do it, but you know, he was
Right,
was.
exactly.
So while we were there, I went in Bleecker Bob's and they had Flipside. That old fanzine.
Yeah, I remember
sort of
Flipside,
the
yeah.
fun version of Maximum Rock and
Right,
Roll,
yep.
right? I'd never seen it before. I'd read MRR, but I'd never seen Flipside. So this is a very fortuitous moment. So I bought this issue. And I went back to the hotel we were staying, started reading all the letters, and there was one from a girl my age who lived in a place called Morgan Hill, California, talking about her life and her mother abusing her and all this stuff, and we became pen pals.
Oh, okay.
And then we started sending each other pictures, and it went from there. And
That's
I was
adorable.
16 years old.
That's
and so I went to my dad and I went, and this is where he drew the line. I said, I've got the money through working at Shoney's and Hardee's and selling this stuff. I'm going to get on the bus and go to California, and I'll come back in a couple weeks. And he was like, the hell you are? Are you kidding me? I've been on buses, man. I'm not putting you on a bus to California. So the Meat Puppets played at the brewery on a Sunday night. And I went to that show. I had a friend of mine come up from Greensboro named Brian Grant in a Mohawk. This was early August of '85. And our plan was he took the bus up from Greensboro. My uncle was going to drive us to the bus station. And I was going to tell my uncle we were both getting on the bus to go back to Greensboro. And Brian's dad would drive me back in a couple days. And in fact, what I did was I bought for $100 a round-trip ticket.
To Morgan Hill, California,
Francisco.
Out to San Francisco.
And here's the thing. Like, the idea was that Brian doesn't tell them, right? So Brian
Yes.
gets home, and he's like, well, your parents are so nice, And so he called him immediately. He was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. And so I
Guilt is a powerful
I called
drug.
my dad from, 2 or 3 hours into it, and he was like, do you have any idea what you're doing to your mother?
Oh, that probably felt good, right?
Have
The
any
guilt, the
idea?"
shame,
Yeah.
the
shame,
guilt.
yeah.
And I went, I'm sure I do, but I am not turning around, buddy.
Did you get there?
Oh, yeah.
How long did a bus ride take?
3 days.
Yeah.
Really? That's
Yeah.
not too bad.
3 days. It stopped a lot, but it took 3 days. There were no real layovers, but I stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks.
Tell me about the
And-
girl. I want to know more about
Oh,
this story.
she
It's
was
kind of a
awesome.
beautiful, kind of little romantic teenage.
She was great, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of deceit involved, unfortunately. Like, obviously, I couldn't tell her, she was living with her father and her grandmother because she'd fallen out with her mother.
Okay.
And she was living with her father and her grandmother, and we had to lie. I would say that I used to live there and was just back in town visiting, and then I'd go to sleep. He had to check this out.
Oh my God! If her dad knew,
He would have killed me. He just gotten out
my
of jail. He
God.
just got out of
man.
Oh my
yeah,
God!
Yeah, no, he was a rough dude, man. He was a rough dude. And her grandmother was really sweet, but they had they lived out in this town called Gilroy, which is the garlic capital of the world.
Things you learn in
Yes,
California,
exactly. And there were all these fields, plum fields out there and stuff like that. It was very sketchy. Very sketchy. A lot of migrant workers, who didn't want you in their shit, and I don't blame them.
How far away from it was San Francisco?
Maybe an hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Tops, 45 minutes on a good day. And so Vicky's grandmother had a greenhouse, like filled with plants and bugs like that big, and that's where I would sleep. And
John is indicating a very large bug.
And her dad, and her dad would get up. He had some, god awful job where he had to be there before the sun came up, and he'd get up every morning, and he'd back his car out and shine his headlights right on that goddamn greenhouse where I was sleeping. Motherfucker never saw me. He'd have killed me and chopped my head off.
That must have been
chewed
like,
my face
yeah.
apart.
This is like a
Another
good
tense
little
minute.
short
A
story.
little tense moment there.
And so what I did was, I finally called my dad and he said, here's the deal. You've missed, school had started again, 11th grade. And he said, you've missed enough school where if you don't get back by this day, they're going to make you repeat the grade. And God knows I didn't want to do that. I
Yeah.
hated school.
No.
So I took my girlfriend, who was 16 years old, put her on the bus with me and took her back to North Carolina, violating so many.
Oh my
Chuck
God.
Berry got
Yeah,
thrown in
yeah.
jail for years for
but
that.
you weren't an adult, so
Yeah.
you would have just been.
I would have still got in trouble.
Oh my
Oh,
God!
I
So
would
she
say
came
so.
back to North Carolina. Did she tell her parent? Like what?
No. Oh no.
Oh, then
So my dad rolls up to the bus station to pick me up, and he's like, "Yep, I thought this was gonna happen."
Oh, man.
So he goes to get us some food. We went to like Burger King or something And I remember her going, "Wow, you're right. It really is rednecky here. Everyone's staring at us."
Why did I leave San Francisco?
Yeah, because we were all punk rocked out. But so the next day my dad calls his lawyer and says,
Put that girl on a plane.
and,
Yeah,
and the
how's he get a
lawyer was
lawyer
like, "Get
involved?"
her home now."
Oh my God.
You could get in so much trouble, you have no idea. So he, my dad was a stand-up guy. He called her parents. He said, "This is what happened. I would appreciate it if you would go easy on my son. I'll do whatever you want to do."
Yeah.
And they said, fuck it. She can stay there for a while. So she stayed
Wow.
with us for like a month, and then finally she flew back, and I have not seen her since.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Did y'all end on a bad note, John? I'm all vested into this
So you wanna know
relationship story.
This is such the punk rock love story. So the idea was that she was going to come back for Christmas. Well, once she got out there, her mom was married to this asshole who worked on like nuclear, bullshit. He worked for like some, Lockheed or some bullshit like that. And he called my dad a witch doctor.
Because he was a psychiatrist?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, and all this stuff. And
So this guy was Homer Simpson.
yes, totally. He was worse than that. He's like Homer Simpson with more. He was,
Anger.
He was more.
He's an angry
Evil Homer.
And he was more articulate,
Homer
right?
Simpson.
And he had more power.
Oh.
So, it was
So
like
he
the
was a
worst.
Mr. Burns.
Yes, he was like that. So he called my dad a witch doctor and all this stuff. And said there's no way that she's coming there for Christmas. We're not letting her do that, So fast forward probably to January. It was right before I started really playing with Light in August, and that was good timing. This was the first time this had happened to me, though unfortunately not the last. It became clear to me that she had started hanging out with this other dude, and she ran away from home again with this guy. They went to Boston, and it broke my heart.
Oh. Mm.
It broke my heart. It broke my heart. It broke my heart. I was devastated.
Did you write your first song
I don't
over
think
that?
so. No, I don't think so. I think I just didn't know what to do. I'd never experienced anything like that. I was about to turn 17, and I was I was devastated. But thankfully, again, I had this band of older dudes to go play the Cat's Cradle with and stuff. So
You'll get over it, kid.
So I got over it pretty quickly. And then, fast forward, a year, and she was writing me letters, I made a mistake, I love you, blah, blah, blah. By that point, I was like,
Whatever.
moved on.
Yeah. Okay.
it ain't hard feelings.
Wow.
Right,
oh,
yeah.
Vicky. Oh, Vicky.
But we're friends on Facebook now.
Oh, that's a nice. Facebook makes the world go round.
Now I'm going to go stalk her.
So,
Keep talking.
just to, let's, so now, okay, fast forward 30-some years later.
Yes.
What,
This is so much fun. Are you guys having a good time?
Yeah.
I'm having a great time.
Yeah. I love the stories.
looking, after so many years playing music and being part of the, I guess, industry even on a lower level,
Yeah.
Well, what?
Significantly.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean, no, I'm not trying to sound shitty.
No,
but you know what I mean. Yeah, you're in it,
Yeah.
and you're like, you experience, all the hard work, just not the extremely large reward.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunately what 99.9, 9.8% of musicians. What's
She's totally cute.
Yeah.
She is so cute.
Wow.
And I love that she loves cats. Anybody who loves cats has a special place in my heart.
There you go.
yeah? What keeps you going? Because I wrestle with that myself.
I was thinking about this the other day because obviously I play drums for Sarah Shook and the Disarmers, and they're signed to Bloodshot, and they're touring a lot, and all the kind of bells and whistles. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things, and nothing at all. I never wanted that stuff, man. I'm not sure that I was ever competitive. I'm definitely not now, but I'm not really sure that I ever was, and I'm sure that caused frustration, to you, to record companies,
Totally.
band members, because I just didn't give a shit.
No, but that's your thing. I think that's why I love going to your shows. It is like always being
appreciate that.
home.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because I
appreciate
kind
that.
of am like you. I don't think I could ever be in the limelight, be famous or anything like that. This is why I like a smaller town,
Right.
too.
Sure.
I mean, I like kind of feeling comfortable and cozy and kind of having my thing going
Yeah.
on. I don't think I could never be a New York City girl. You
No,
know
I
what
couldn't
mean?
either. I couldn't either.
It's like, I mean, and that's kind of like the question I had. What kept you here? What's kept you here in this area? I mean, but it sounds like you've had these wonderful, cool adventures, and
I have, and to be
and-
honest with you, had I had the opportunity to stay in England,
Yeah.
I feel fairly certain,
You probably
especially
would
with
have.
with the
At that
kinda
point, yeah.
dissolution of the relationship and stuff like that, and Raleigh being so rednecky to me at that time.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, I just hated it. I probably would have stayed there when I was 20, almost 22. A guy I went to high school with in college named Andy Hervey had moved here, and he was in a relationship with Caitlin Heddle, who owns Mushi. I don't want to say it the wrong way, but the hair
Yeah.
styling place.
Yeah.
And they were in a relationship together, and he came to see me at my house in Raleigh, where I lived with a couple of guys in Finger, out near the fairgrounds, and he was like, "You got to get out of here, man! Like, you got to get out of here. This town sucks, and you hate it, and you were born here, and you keep leaving and coming back. Like, I just got a new place in Chapel Hill." And my sister went to college here. My mom and dad met here. My mother was in nursing school, and my dad was doing his residency. So I'd come here a lot growing up. All my friends who lived here loved it. You know, I had all my freaky friends went to high school here, and they didn't get nearly the amount of shit that I did in Raleigh.
Right.
So I thought, you're right. Fuck this. Why am I still doing this? Is
Yeah.
it pride? Is it to prove something?
Stubborn.
That I can walk down the street wearing eyeliner and take all this shit? Fuck it. So I moved to Chapel Hill, and I just immediately
Felt yourself relaxing a little.
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just all these worries and cares just kind of flew away.
Raleigh was kind of known for the agriculture school,
It
and
was super redneck.
Yeah.
UNC has always been,
You know.
very liberal,
And-
progressive.
And I would get some shit here. I looked a lot more normal then, but I got a job at Poindexter Records in Durham, and I moved to Chapel Hill, and I just loved it, and I've never looked back. One of the reasons I never left North Carolina until my parents died is because one of the only problems of living in London was being that far away from my parents. Okay,
Yeah.
because we were tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I loved the independence. I had the kind of parents who, no matter what I was doing, my dad would always go, I bet you need some money, don't you? Well, here's $50, and you knew the price that came with that. You
Right.
know what I mean, And so it was great.
Keep us
to
in
be
the loop.
a zillion miles away
Yeah.
to where that kind of thing couldn't happen.
All right.
But I was really happy. Not happy. When I got the call that my father had gone in for open heart surgery, and I lived right over here on Smith Level
Yeah.
Road, I was very glad that I was 30 minutes away and not, 10 hours.
No, I
by
understand
fucking
that.
plane.
Yeah.
And I just love North Carolina. I really do. I love the mountains. I love the beach. Obviously frustrated with the politics, but I've always been frustrated with the politics, I mean, had I not lived in North Carolina, I wouldn't have met you guys. I probably wouldn't have met, Daniel Chavis. They're
Well, that's the positive right there. See, you couldn't
yeah.
have left. You should have left North Carolina as quickly as possible. No, I just have to give Daniel some crap. Also,
you
Daniel,
itching to
stay away
play
from the red
something?
wine.
Oh, do you have a capo?
Yes, I do.
There's one on the floor.
Yep.
The floor.
The floor. Yeah.
The floor.
Yeah, do you think you could play something off your forthcoming
I
solo
can do
record? That
for
would be
sure.
awesome.
Yeah, they're very happy songs. They're very up with people, kind of Oprah Winfrey.
Well,
type songs.
you know what? I love how your dad is such a good, strong figure, and positive. And, what advice do you think is the best advice that he gave you that is something that you're like, I'm going to definitely do this for my son when he gets X age or whatever, or this is the thing that I really want, my son to...
I mean, I don't think I could nail that down to one thing. I think when Sarah Shook and the Disarmers started picking up and we were going to be going on the road, right? I had a talk with my son, and basically what I said to him was, here's the deal. When your grandfather died, he and I were tight, and that relationship was a huge, huge part of my life,
Yeah.
Bad things had happened to me personally right before he died, and we were so close that he was out at a motorcycle rally, 1,000 miles away, and when he found out that I'd gone through this particularly bad breakup, he left. He came home to be with, he was concerned about me, in other words.
He was at a motorcycle
Yeah.
rally.
Yep.
I
People that
I
don't
just
know
want him more
John
and
Howie
more.
Sr. need to understand the figure he cut. You would see him most of the time in front of John, doing this. I'm not
I
sure
don't know what
exactly
that
what
dance
the
was. I
dance
don't know what that
was.
dance was.
It's sort of like a
I don't know.
hopping from left side to
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But he had the what do you call it? It's like
Giant mustache.
it was a mustache.
Giant.
And did it go? Did he have the deal where it went from the
Like a
up to the
handlebar?
sidebars?
No,
Yeah.
because he didn't groom it. It was just this giant.
And sometimes the biker vest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
What was
And-
on the back of the biker vest?
Nothing, and he just kept it black.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
He
didn't-
didn't go in for.
Snake or
No.
scorpion. Okay.
And yeah, at the same time, this man was also like one of the leading psychiatrist, substance abuse thinkers of North Carolina. He was a trip.
Yeah,
I
he was a
mean,
good guy.
he wasn't my dad, but I miss him.
Yeah.
He was a good dude. Yeah, and my mom was great too in her own way. She was a jazz piano player and she was a therapist, but she kind of was. Mom sort of did other things.
Yeah.
My dad came to every fucking $2 Pistol show within an hour of his home.
I love both of them. I mean, I'm totally into the jazz, so I could totally hook up with your mama.
But they were both there like a
Yeah.
humble pie when we played there.
Yeah.
They would both come to those
Yeah.
shows. Yeah. So there were times when they were both there for sure.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But
That's
it's
awesome.
a different vibe. I think your dad, and this is just an outside view, is that your dad seemed to be like a more, engaging sociable person. Your mom seemed to have a little bit more reserve, as some people do.
Yeah.
So and that I noticed, but
That's definitely true. Yeah. But so I told my son, I said, here's the thing. When your grandfather died, we were really tight. But I said to him, you and I are already at least that tight, if not honestly tighter. And let me tell you, man, like it took me probably until I was 25 to get that close with my dad.
Yeah.
Okay. So like the fact that we're already there, I'm not going to jeopardize that under any circumstances.
Yeah.
So if at any point, we're apart for a certain amount of time and you don't like it, you just need to tell me because this is the most important thing for me. One of the great things about having parents like that is that like, despite the issues, and I certainly had issues with them, like make no mistake, but I never really had to go like a day not knowing that I was loved or thinking that I was not loved.
Yeah.
So no matter what happened, I always had that kind of base, and that can serve you. I mean, my self-esteem is like wee. So
good
Parenting is hard, man. I mean, it's just like these years, before
Yeah.
you get to college or the school years.
right.
It's hard because you're constantly parenting, you're constantly helping them learn lessons. Everything's a battle
Yeah.
because
Yes.
they are. I mean,
Everything.
I think we all have strong children.
Totally.
They don't take what you say as gospel.
No.
They are constantly challenging you because they are trying to find their
Yeah.
own way. And you're like, no, I've been there, done that. Listen to me. So it's hard, but
You're right.
but I mean, it's just what has to happen. I think I was the same way.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I had a push and pull relationship with my parents when I was, teenager.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, when I hit college after high school, it's like, whew, we made it,
Yeah,
and
totally,
then it's
totally.
like the pressure's kind of off. You turn out to be an okay kid. You're not in jail.
Right.
You're not in that
Good sign,
direction.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can have like a relationship with your parents where it's
It's
more
like friends.
friendly.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
exactly.
but when you're in high school and under that, you can't be their friend. You have to
Yeah.
be the parent.
The lines are drawn.
Yeah.
You guys are on opposite sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's always tough because, you really want to be one of those, I feel your pain. And you just, you want to be that good pal.
Yeah.
But that ain't your gig.
No, it's
your
not.
gig is
It's
like,
not.
You can do that later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I unfortunately was not in that zone.
Graduate high school, then I'll be your friend.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I'd ever achieved that. I mean, with my mom, I think there was more of that, but not really. Definitely being on the other side of it. But I think, what happens at least. I think at that point where you get out of, especially in your early 20s, and you kind of get out from under all that, and you start getting some life experiences that gets you, into yourself, and then you start hitting those moments where you're like, boy, I think I might want to talk to one of my parents about this situation suddenly. Yeah. And then, of course, as a parent, someone once told me, like, that's the greatest therapy you'll ever have because it'll force you to look at everything that you've ever done, growing up. And it was like, wow, that is so true.
There is a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
But,
I don't know about you guys. Like, I find myself, I directly quoted my dad 2 days ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I do that.
I said something to Daria, and he started arguing with me, and then I was like, "Here it comes. I'm gonna say it. This is not debatable. This is mandatory."
Oh, I'm gonna
like,
have to use that. That sounds good.
I remember those words. What am I doing?
I always like the feeling of like I've heard this before, but kind of from a different direction.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So-
The one my mom would say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Yeah. So we're trying.
Yeah.
I mean, well, for Jet, it is what you say and how you. It's both. So I mean, but we're trying to get to him tone.
Yeah.
And how you're saying things.
Sure.
Matter.
Well, that's a huge deal.
Because we're
point.
trying to help him out socially.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this, John.
Sure.
And why don't you play us out? Play us a song.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've had a wonderful time. The record's going to be called Not Tonight. I've actually got the artwork done. Todd Emmert did the artwork. You know Todd.
Todd used to be my roommate.
Okay. So
a million years ago. And we used to go walk to the cave every day to play pool. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did the artwork, and it's beautiful. It's really great. So it's called Not Tonight, and it's a record. So let's see. This is a song from it. It's called Back When I Cared. Let me see if I can. Let's see. It ain't been easy getting by without you, but I guess that I'm stronger now after what we've been through. When things got really bad, I'd think of what we could have had if we had only dared. But that was back when I cared. Hey, that was back when I cared. Better believe the hard times were as bad as I've seen. Afraid to close my eyes, you'd be there in my dreams, singing sweet songs while we played. They used to wash the rain away. like the sunshine in your hair, but that was back when I cared. Hey, that was back when I cared. Everyone's got a limit, and you pushed me to mine. Call it a race, say you win it, we're still at the same finish line. I look for your headlights pulling up to my place, but the only thing shining were them tears on my face. 'Cause you made some other plans, you're hanging with some other man. In them days I did not have a prayer, but that was back when I cared. Hey, that was back